So the question is, can this also, it's the most committed students left now. Someone had to go, right? This is just where we left them, so which is the Dīgha Nikāya, kind of long stories, just to show what they look like. That's the first book, the 13 of them. So I think we cover that quite. We looked through the synopses and the access to insight. So that's where we are. Majjhima Nikāya is a very stock standard. It's a little bit dry and monastic. They're a bit weighty, the way that they go through. They're quite long and not too long. So there's a Majjhima Nikāya, that orange one. And here's synopsis. So you'll see, I won't go too much of them, but they're like in this difficult but important sort of, the Buddha reviews in depth. Okay, people saying goodbye. One of the most fundamental principles, so you can hear what it's like. It's the root sequence. It's difficult but important. Fundamental principle. You know, it's going to be heavy. It's not going to be like those stories. Just to give, I want to give, I don't want to get into it, what these are, but this is about this. Asavas, which is about sensuality, becoming, views and ignorance. So it's going a bit deeper in its more monkish, in its temperament, rather than being stories or having entertainment factor. It's more information, it's drier, and they're medium length. They're still pretty long. Fear and terror. How Tanisra does a nice job of these little synopses. What would it take to live in solitude in the wilderness, completely free of fear? The Buddha explains. So he's got this nice way of putting it. Ooh, let's have a look. Let's take a trip. Like it's advertising almost. You know, how he manages to get you intrigued. And then with the simile of the cloth and the difference between of defining one in pure mind. And so just give you an idea, the Satipatthana Sutta, the big one, on 4 foundations of mindfulness. One of the other places it shows up is not the only place. There's a long, medium, short version of it. Mula Pariyaya Asava Parabhutama, the Sallekha Sutta, and then this is brilliant. It's not that brilliant in that version, but there's a brilliant series of talks. I think it was during one whole rains retreat, like a 3-month course. Mahasi Sayadaw took this one sutta, Sallekha Sutta, 8th one in the Majjhima Nikāya, discuss on effacement, means shyness, means the opposite of bragging and boasting and making a big deal about yourself and being conceited and showy. It's like this, to cool yourself down. It's 44 defilements, like cruelty, and it's making this notion that other people may do that, I won't. It's this inner resolve to be cool. Other people may be boastful, I will not be. I refuse, I will give up that quality. Other people may harbor grudges, I will give it up. So have a quick look at that sutta as it appears here, the Sallekha Sutta, the discourse on self-effacement. Basically, it goes like this. It's a list. And Chunda comes up to him. Chunda has just come out of jhanic absorption. He's been on a jhana course and he's come out of bliss, about having rapture. It's so easy, so nice. And he's kind of floating on air. But the Buddha says to him, he says, you've just had a blissful experience, but you have not yet removed these things. So here it is, says Chunda, effacement should be practiced by you like this. Others will be harmful, we shall not be harmful. Thus effacement can be done. And then it goes through all of the precepts. And then it goes through thoughts of ill will and wrong views. Then it goes through the 8-fold path backwards. Wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong actions, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, wrong concentration. So we shall have right concentration here. Thus self-effacement will be done. And then wrong knowledge, wrong deliverance. That's wrong liberation. People think they've got a liberation because they got powerful muscles now, something. Wrong deliverance. Others will be overcome by stuff, and others will be agitated, others will be doubting, others will be angry. So it goes on with 44 of these, and that's in Mahasi Sayadaw's book, which I want to introduce you to, he takes each one of those and gives a discourse on each one of them. So there's 44 discourses on each different one. And it gives a Jataka story and a definition of what it means, an example of it in person, and everything. So it's a very good series. I was delighted when I found it, and I did a reading of that book and uploaded it. So there's like 150 MP3s that read through those stories. Chunda, is impossible that one who is himself sunk in the mire or the mud, in the sinking mud, should pull out another who is sinking in the sinking mud. But it is possible, Chunda, the one who's not sunk in the mire himself should pull out another one who's sunk in the mire. It is not possible, Chunda, the one who is not restrained, not disciplined, not quenched as to his passion should make others restrain, if possible. So it's possible to have jhanic absorption, but still to have actually quite a lot of defilement still there. So it's through Magga, through Nibbana realization, that those get pulled out permanently. So he's making this point repeatedly, that jhana only gives you temporary relief and bliss for a while, but they're all still sleeping. You could do the blissful jhanic concentration we did on the kasina that we did just then, all of those practices, and then you get a text that someone's sleeping with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and woomph, and it will all go out the window. You won't be able to concentrate at all. But that if you practice those ways and go to Nibbana 4 times, you get the text and you go, you have no problems. You wouldn't get a rage which is dormantly sleeping, but just hasn't got the object yet, which is called anusaya kalesa, sleeping defilements. Deep like the ocean is this sutta, on the effacement dealing with 44 items showing you defilements. So there it goes in a list, but Mahasi goes through it in, I'll show you that before we carry on. So let's just move on now to, this is how you see it in Digital Pali Reader, Majjhima, first book, which is the Mula Parayayasi. And the first book is divided into 5 Mula Parayayasa. Vago. Sihanada Vago. Mula is a root. So this is the root 50. That's what it means. Sihanada is a lion. So this is the lion group. Opama, I'm not sure what Opama is. Mahayamaka, the big couples. The small couples. Chula Yamaka. And then so you click on that arrow here. If this thing will stop jumping around, click on that and you would come up with the number 1, Majjhima Nikāya 1, Ewang Mesutang, Ekang Samyang Bhagawa, and then you get your sutta. So there they are. And then if you click on the first one, you get the first one. So there are the first 7 of the Mahavagga. Sorry, no. So next, here we go. Kudaka. I skipped over a couple here. Kudaka is this basket of nice, interesting stories. The Jatakas are in there, the Dhammapadas in there, the Hungry Ghost stories, and so on. Mia means Milinda. So Milinda Panha questions is King Milinda. So it's just the Pali version, starting from the beginning. And we won't do all too much on the Pali version because we're going to go do this, show this. I'm not sure where to order these, and think these are just clips to give you ideas of the kind of things that are in there. So here's a couple that are started about mindfulness. What Nagasena is the characteristic mark of mindfulness. Noting and keeping in mind as... Actually, I'll just get the first bit where he meets Nagasena because it's quite amusing and it's a better introduction. So he says then, how many rain seasons do you have, Nagasena? Each monk has like 5 or 4 or 3 or 12 or something. How many rain seasons do you have, Nagasena? 7, Your Majesty. How can you say it is your 7? Is it you who are 7 or the number that is 7? This is the king, got him on the spot, and the Nagasena said, your shadow is now on the ground. Are you the king or is the shadow the king? Oh, I'm the king, Nagasena, but the shadow comes into being just because of me. Just so, king, the number of the years is 7. I'm not 7, but it is because of me that the number 7 comes into being, and it is mine in the same sense as the shadow is yours. Most wonderful, Nagasena, and extraordinary. Well has this puzzle been solved by you, difficult as it was. Then the king said, Venerable sir, will you discuss with me again? This is when they've just met, and the king is out on the hunt looking for a real arahant, so he's been told this is a real one. If your majesty will discuss as a scholar, yes, but if you will discuss as a king, no. How is it then that scholars discuss? When scholars discuss, there is a summing up and an unraveling. One or other is shown to be in error. He admits his mistake, yet he does not become angry. Then how is it the kings discuss? When the king discusses a matter and advances a point of view, if anyone differs from him at the point, he is apt to punish him. When the king discusses a matter and advances a point of view, if anyone differs, very well then, it is a scholar that I will discuss. Let your reverence talk without fear. It is well, your majesty. Nagasena, I will ask a question, said the king. Ask it, sir. I have asked it, your reverence. Then I've answered. What have you answered? What have you asked? Thinking, this monk is a great scholar. He is quite able to discuss things with me. The king instructed his minister, Devamantiya, to invite him to the palace with a large company of monks and went away muttering, Nagasena, Nagasena. This is the intro. And then I'll show you the book. One version of it looks like this. And the reason is nice. So that intro is just this prologue, the debate of King. This chapter deals with a really key part of the teachings, the soul, the rebirth, the beginning of time, sense basis, the Buddha, and attachment, and then all of these memory, solving of dilemmas. There are really critical ones. So they really is an animated way of bringing it to life. And some of the king's questions on rebirth. He was reborn, Nagasena. Is he the same person or another? Neither the same nor another. Give me an illustration. In the case of a pot of milk that turns first to curds, then to butter, then to ghee, it would not be right to say that the ghee, the butter, and the curds were the same as the milk, but they have come from that. So neither would it be right to say they are something else. Explains very succinctly, the king's questions always relate step by step one to another. And it's actually difficult to pick out just one or another question to show you like a good one, because they're all kind of like a chain of questions as well. What is Nagasena that is reborn? Mind and matter. Is it this mind and matter that is reborn? No, it is not. But by this mind and matter, deeds are done. And because of those deeds, and because of the deeds, another mind and matter is reborn. But that might happen. But that mind and matter is not thereby released from the results of its previous deeds. Give me an illustration. It's like a fire that a man might kindle, and having warmed himself, he might leave it burning and go away. And then if that fire were to set light to another man's field, and the owner were to seize him and accuse him before the king, and he's to say, Your Majesty, I did not set fire to this man's field. The fire that I left burning was different to that which burned his field. I'm not guilty. Would he deserve punishment? Indeed, yes, because whatever he might say, the latter fire resulted from the former one. Just so, O king, by this mind and matter, by this mind and matter, deeds are done, and because of those deeds, another mind and matter is reborn. But that mind and matter is not thereby released from the results of its previous deeds. Will you, Nagasena, be reborn? What is the use of asking that question again? Have I not already told you that if I die with attachment in my mind, I shall be reborn? If not, I shall not. So he goes on, he opens up these questions that often come to people that after thinking about it, or they hear questions that come about karma and rebirth, and very, very thoroughly, actually, the whole teaching is unraveled, and not by the is there, Nagasena, such a thing as the one who knows Vedagu? What is Veda? What is this thing, Vedagu? The living principle within that sees, the living principle that hears and tastes and smells and feels and discerns things. Just as we, sitting here, can look out of any window we wish to, he says that if, O king, the living principle within can see, hear, taste, smell, and feel things like you say, can it not also see forms through the ear? He quite good. Like, got this little homunculus, this little creature inside that can see things out of the eye. He says, well, if it was such a thing, he could look through the ear as well. So there isn't such a thing as like that. So he, step by step, he gets him to see the way that the Buddha does see things. Like that. Not enough time to go through them all one by one. Probably able to pick out one or two. I did do a couple of those ones that I just read you. If Naga insane of the Buddha, is he a disciple? Yes, he's something like 400 years after the Buddha. And lots of the questions like this, like the king asks him about the Buddha. He says, have you or your teachers seen the Buddha? He says, no, great king. He says, well, then Nagasena, there is no Buddha. He says, well, have you or your father seen the river Ula in the Himalayas? He says, no, venerable sir. It goes, then would it bite to say there is no river Uha? He says, yes, you're dexterous. So he asks him lots of questions about the Buddha. He says, how can other Buddhas know that he's incomparable? There's another one. Hold on. About the ocean. Someone says, so this is not part of the Tipitika. It is in part of the Tipitika, considered as such by the Burmese school, or just included as part of it, but it came a little bit later on. So this is actually King Milinda, this on this coin. It was a real person, and Nagasena was presumably a real arahant. And so this is recorded by the scribes of King Mananda. It's Bactrian king. And you get a lot about the background of this up here. Really worth reading. It's very, very the rise of the Bactrian kingdom. So it talks all about it. They can tell a lot of things. They could tell by the way the Pali is written and the style of it and so on. Really good. I mean, this is a really good way to actually learn what's in the teachings. If you see in the Digiha Nikāya, heavy duty, slow, drag out a single point very pedantically, point by point, repeatedly 3 times. Whereas this goes colorfully with wit and humor. You know, where does wisdom dwell, O king? Nowhere. Where does the wind dwell? Where does the wind dwell? Nowhere. Then there's no wind. So not bad. So he keeps doing this to him, and then he says, I'm trying to find this one about the Buddha where he says, how do you know the Buddha was great? He says, only by the teachings, like a great river. He says, how do you know that the river, the sea, ocean is deep? Because these great rivers I've seen all keep flowing into it without changing it. So it must be deep. He said, it's the same as all the teachers that I've had were amazing, and they had all this deep knowledge. So it must be because it in the same way as a comparison. Excellent. I really recommend that as well. I think the Dhammapada and this, if you only read those 2 things, you wouldn't need to read, you were asking about chronologically about the time of the Buddha. You don't necessarily, little things, those are key points about this, about the actual teaching. So with same with documentaries, people make these documentaries about the birth and the prince and the riding out, seeing the foresights of the old people, you know, and then he gets enlightened under a tree, and then the credits come up, and you don't actually hear what he taught, just that you only get that much because they take that approach, chronology approach or historical approach. So if you just only read this, you get the teachings, you get very many things about it. Important things, really. It's not actually that important. That's why the Buddha said, I'm done, I can pass the teaching on, you don't need me anymore. Because the Buddha was only passing on the teaching, and once he'd got that done, he was okay. He was like, I'm finished. It brings a great deal of clarity to the teaching. So I really recommend it. As I said, I'm recording these, so if you also want these MP3s, I'm going to put them up pretty soon up onto one of those sites, probably that one we just made yesterday about put the videos up on, access to them, and you can just then listen to them as MP3s. One question, one MP3. This is a very nice one. It said, these 3 Nagasena, consciousness, Pana, wisdom, Panya, and the soul, Jiva, are they different in essence or only in name? He said, oh, knowing, O king, is the mark of consciousness, and discrimination is the mark of wisdom. A soul cannot be found. Well, the elder said, a hard thing has been done by the Blessed One, distinguishing of all those mental conditions that depend on an organ of sense. showing such and such is contact, such is feeling, such is perception, such is intention, such is the mind. He says, give me an illustration. If a man were to take a handful of water from the ocean and tasting it, could say, this water is from the Ganges, this from the Jumna, this from the Ganda, this from the Saro, and this from the Mai. What more difficult than this is the distinguishing of those mental states that accompany any one of the senses. Since it was midnight, the king made offerings to Nagasena, and the king said, like a lion in the golden cage longs only for freedom, so do I long for the monk's life. Really recommended reading, easy reading, good fun reading, and it answers a lot of questions that come up. So that's an introduction about that, which I did as a sort of some snapshots. Another one is this, which is from the Sallekha Nikāya, which is the third of those groups, Dīgha Nikāya, Majjhima Nikāya, Sallekha Nikāya, the group discourses. And that book is divided into 5 sections, but the first one I really recommend because it's also colourful. The other ones are dry, mainly dry and analytical. That's a bit of a generalization, but the first one, Gata, is a poem. Sagata is the versed section. So in 11 books of these verses, sections of verses, and I'll give you an example of it. That first one, here. Here one, the book of the saying of the stanzas, chapter 1, the Devas 1, the reed suttas 1, crossing the flood. Thus have I heard, the exalted one was once staying in Sawati, a Jetava grove in Anathapindika's monastery. Ewang me sutang, Bhagwan Sawatiyang Viharati Jetavana Anathapindika sa arame. Now a certain Deva, when the night was fast, spent shedding radiance with his effulgent beauty over the whole Jeta grove. Atano Anatara Jevata Taratya Abekantua Devata Jetwana Oba Setwa came into the presence of the Exalted One. Yena Bhagawa Abhiwa Deva saluted him and stood to one side. So standing, he spake thus to the Exalted One. Ekamanta sa Ekamantang Titako sa Devata Bhagawantang eta dawocha. Tell me, dear sir, how did thou cross the flood? Katang mo manasa hoga mataniti. Unstayed and unstriving did I cross the flood. Apatitang kwahang avuso anuyohang ogmantarekang. But how dost thou, without staying, without striving, cross the flood? Yata katang panatvang marisang apatitang anayuhang ogamatayarhi ti. When I, friend, kept myself stayed, and verily I sank. Yada kvang avuso santitang tadasu sansidang. When I, friend, strove hard, then verily was I whirled about. Yada kvahang avuso ayuhang tadasu nibuyahang. So, friend, unstayed, unstriving, did I cross the flood. Ewang kvahang avuso apatitang anayahang ogamatarinti. The Deva. Now what length of time since I beheld a perfect saint from evil wholly freed? Tirasang atasang rahmanang Daryutang. One who knows, stayed nor striving in the flood, that safely cross where all the world sticks fast. Apatitang, anayugung, tinang, loke, visatitang. Thus spake that Deva, and the master approved. Idamahu gocha, sahang devata, samanoyo, sata, ahosi. And the Deva, noting that approval, made salutation by the right. Atako sa devata, samanohung, me sata ti bhagava tang, abiwa deva, and vanished there and then. Badakinang katwa tatewang tarayon ti. So I've done the whole of that book like that in English and the Pali, and also the Pali, but just the English is all right, or just the English and the Pali if you like to hear how it sounds in the original as well. Good stuff. There's a lot of humor, there's a lot of human interest, and a lot of insight into the way that they were taught. They weren't always taught in this sort of dry analytical formulae, and you can get that from this. So it's a really good way to see how the early teachings were taught, and they weren't always taught only as like meditation and vipassana, all sorts of things. You get a lot of human interest, a lot of, you know, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis going off to the forest and having to deal with their doubts, or there were farmers coming up and squabbling, or lots and lots of different things, lots of little mini dramas, lots of dry humor, even some of the way that the devas are pictured as a uppity. Some of the times there's 3 devas that come down and try to sort of test the Buddha and tell it, say, you just say all those things, but you know, on the quiet, you're really naughty on the side, something like this. And he says, no, it's not true. There is a perfected one, and I'm perfected. And they said, oh, sorry, we shouldn't have done it. You know, only there's a other one, you know, what do you call, dared me to come down and do it. So I'm very sorry. And then he says, there are perfected ones, and perfected ones never lie. And one of them jumps up in the air and says, who are you to say those sort of things? There's no one is perfected. Everyone makes a little slip in their error. And something gets all uppity like this. And so there's lots of different sort of colorful scenarios that happen in there. That's the Sakata Vago. Very, very good. And it's all in lots of little poems. So it's got also softer on the ear to follow. Is it the Theravada thing to constantly reference the Pali? Because I've noticed a lot of people in Theravada, Burmese tradition, when even contemporary teachers, yes, I've had teachers tell me that if you change anything, you're creating bad karma. Oh, so that's why a lot of teachers really are grounded in Pali, and they recite the Pali. And it's a lot of the whole, like in meditation, the more you get out of the way and let all come through, it works. Well, the same thing if you can memorize and you've done your study, when people ask you about the Buddhist teachings, what you should be able to do is just sort of relay on, not start talking about yourself and going on about your own dramas, your own history and your own personal opinions or whatever. What the hell is today? In the long run, we're trying to relay on what the Buddha and the great masters realized. So the way to do that is to have read it and know it in Pali. The Pali is the original, authentic source. So it's like getting yourself out of the way so that the Buddha's voice can be heard. Yeah, precisely. And you're transmitting it with, okay. Because there are so many pretty reliable sources. I mean, often, like with that last exercise, I had 2 versions because the Old English Pali Text Society is oldie English. It's like Shakespeare. And it can be even, sometimes even I can't understand it because you are such unused words. I can't understand it. So I'll keep like one of the modern American ones, like Bhikkhu Bodhi, or Access to Insight, because they use bland, flat, almost too flat sometimes. It was quite eloquent, the original, quite interesting and quite carefully crafted. And they just sort of squashed it down into sort of taxi driver English. and it's a little bit too flat sometimes. And so you have to get something more or less in the middle to get the meaning. But I would just check the meaning like that, and the more as I get on in years and seasoned as a monk, I'll check back to the original to look to what Pali word were they using for that. And then you start to build up more familiarity and tackle this problem of the Pali itself. Get more comfortable with it. But necessarily have to go on a course and learn Pali first, you know. It can be just a little help. A couple of things to introduce to. One is what the Mahasi Sallekha book looks like. This is a brilliant book. I've heard so many people say the same thing. I also did this as an audio. And so like it's got 44 of these things, right? 44, here they are. So, you know, there's that one, just arrogance, ingratitude and arrogance, yeah. I don't know what it's going to say, but arrogance is to regard oneself on an equal footing with noble persons and to speak disrespectfully of them. It is the tendency to rival great men who are unique and intellectual peers, spiritual spheres. So he'll talk about the definition of what it is. It's quite a brief one. Usually, let's see if this one has a story. Usually they have like envy. They'll introduce a subject, and then he'll talk about it in daily life, and then he'll talk a little bit about it, you know, in the theory. And then according to the Chula Sutta, he's talking about into the Sutta, Chula Vibhanga Sutta, I think it was. Also not that much of a story. It's usually, I've seen him doing much of it, he'll find characterizations from the suttas. Here you go, like this one's about meanness. 29th one, Majjharya, called wealth. However, on his deathbed, the young man saw the Buddha as the latter, passed the house, paid his respects. I think we just talked about this, yeah. So then, the story of Majjharya Kosala, multi-millionaire, so stingy he did not offer a drop of cooking oil to alms mendicants. That's right, I remember this one. One day he was returning from the royal palace. He saw a man eating food, fried food, party, rose in desire to eat such food. However, did not wish any food to be prepared for his wife, let alone for his other members of his household, since that would mean using a lot of rice butter. Because of his stinginess, he did not want to tell anyone about his desire. However, the desire became oppressive, and last he lay miserably in his bed. When pressed by his wife, he expressed his desire. In compliance, she went to prepare the food, just enough for her husband, only for him, lest he should have to give any away. If you saw him eating, the couple went up to the top story of the 7-story building, so no one could see one. They, with all the doors bolted, set about to prepare the food. And then the Buddha, seeing their potential for the attainment of stream end winning, sent the elder Moggallana, the one with the magic powers, to the elder, went there and stood in the air near the window of the chamber, outside the window, where they were preparing the food, sitting there hovering in the air. The millionaire was shocked at the sight of the elder. He wondered how the elder had come to his hideaway, and told him that he would not get any food, whatever he might do, being floating in the air. Moggallana performed miracles such as walking, sitting in the air, emitting smoke. Kasyadena did not challenge to emit flames, let his house be burned down. This stingy one, you know, like, put that out. The bhikkhu would not go away unless he got some food. The miser told his wife to prepare a small cake, small one. However, the cake became so big, and he started making it, started swelling up using his magic powers. Then it filled the frying pan. The miser tried to make it small, breaking it up. Every time he tampered with it, it became bigger and bigger. The frustrated miser told his wife to offer a cake to the elder. However, when the woman took a cake, all the cakes stuck together, and it was impossible to separate them. First, the miser tried, and then he and his wife tried together to separate the cakes, but it was in vain. At last, tired and frustrated, the miser no longer had any desire to eat, and so he told his wife to offer all the cakes to the bhikkhu, and Moggallana gave a talk on the benefits of almsgiving. The talk inspired Kosala with so much faith that he asked the elder to eat the cakes in his house. However, the elder said that the Buddha was waiting for food, together with 500 bhikkhus, and with their consent, he took them to the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, which was 45 leagues away. I think he flew them there. It said that Moggallana took them there by his supernatural powers. So they reached the gate of the Jetavana monastery just as they passed the foot of the staircase to the house, and they offered all this. stuff. So, like you see, that where that comes from is just like this 1-2 liner, meanness, Majariya, I shall not do anything. But he expands it out, including stories. Breach brings it all to life. Not at all, I don't know, karmic effects of meanness. Another story, the Brahmin, Toya, and another one. So he really elaborates. So these talks here, that violence, the one about violence, one about killing, these would have been given as a daily talk. So that killing talk, they talk about killing, the act of killing, the causes of other killing, the karmic effects of killing, all these different things that he talks about, these would have been given to a temple full of people for the night, bored of meditating, they would give a 1-hour talk. So each one of these is like a 1-hour talk, full of color, full of richness that makes them like go to bed, meditate away and sleeping. They've heard a good talk. There's 44 of them. So really, really good stuff, and really, really rich in both authority and humor and entertainment and color, just like the Buddha. You always see that with the Buddha. The Buddha suddenly gave a talk all about ancient past. He's very animated when he talks, very colorful. So I think it's just a bit of a crime when you see some people to talk in a very bland way or totally off of this. They've never even heard of these. They've never even explored it. So they start talking off about physics or psychotherapy or something like this when this is very, very rich stuff. So I really recommend the Mahasi. As I've said, I've done it as audios, and I think I've already uploaded them onto the net already. I'm surprised to know that 2,000 years ago they already had fried foods and cake and all that. Oh yeah, yeah. I thought there's a recent thing, fried food, and a recent thing, and cakes and sugar too is there. No. I mean, like, there's a lot of stories where a lot of them, the royals, they would make a really elaborate, rich food. Like, what's the beautiful, the courtesan, Sirima. She used to invite like 25 monks per day to her house. And the banquet they would have would be really ornamented food, really refined, gourmet stuff. It was the end of her life, and she had been paid like 1,000 per night all of her life as a courtesan, high-class prostitute. But so she was really, really wealthy, and she had huge mansions. So she had a whole kitchen staff and a sort of proper marble kitchen with all of the cooking. And those times they knew how to live. They had a good life. These details get filled in and start to be able to picture the times of the life. That's really important. And yeah, that's another good reason for reading through this stuff. You can get your own references to sort of visualize it. Even I've met some scholars, and they sort of think themselves out of existence. So the Buddha probably didn't exist, and they sort of like twiggle themselves out of time for too many really in questions. Another good reason for reading, like Mahasi Sayadaw, he's really firm, he's really established, probably an arahant, really established in the faith. And so then he sort of describes about it. So people who are a bit too scholarly, they're only sort of like, they're not really established in it, and they stay on the outside. They never really meditate enough. They overstudy without having enough sort of fully realized, or haven't been fully appreciate of it, including this one, which is the Great Chronicles of the Buddhas. Also, like, this is a free edition. I found Singapore edition. It's really good. I just showed this, but there is another edition by not Sitagu Sayadaw. His name escapes me for the moment. He's the one. Mingun Sayadaw. Mingun Sayadaw is the one in the Guinness Book of Records who remembered the entire Tipitika. This type he's got Tipitika Dara Dhammapada Garika. Bandagarika means a agama. These titles, he's the top. This is the most authoritative one. And so he wrote this book at the request of the Prime Minister, Great Chronicles of the Buddha. That's like ice cream salesman, isn't it? So it's the kind of things that get covered in this. Yeah. Wait a minute, I did this, what I tried to do as a, because even the contents is about 18 pages long. Talking about the previous Buddhas, like this, Sumedha the Brahmin is the first one in our era. Sumedha the Brahmin is a lay person who meets the Buddha of his time and starts to become the Buddha that we've got in our time. So he meets Dipankara Buddha. So that's way back. I think he's the 24th or the 28th previous Buddha. And he meets Sumedha, who at that time is a Brahmin, or just Brahmin is like a respected layperson. And the Dipankara says to him, "You will become a Buddha. Keep striving to perfect yourself." So he does, and he then goes off and he perfects almsgiving. He perfects morality, renunciation. He perfects all these things one by one by one by one, and starts working on. He starts working towards Panya, the enlightenment, wisdom. So then there's a good long bit, very, very thorough explanation of what the paramis are. And that's really good for everything nowadays to understand, what does it mean by perfect alms giving? What the perfect gift? What's the perfect way to give? What's the intention? Does it matter if you give a little bit or a lot? Can you give money? Shouldn't you give money? Should you give food? When? How? To whom? All these different things are covered under these things. All these questions here. What are the basic conditions of the paramis? What are the factors? It goes on and on in deep detail. And then these are the 24 Buddhas, starting with Dipankara. So you got 24 interesting. These are the names of them all. And chapter 1, the jewel of the Buddha, the story of Sitaku Deva. I won't go. It's pointless to go. There's so much here. It's very thick and full. The conception of the Buddha, Bodhisattva. So this is our Buddha. So you got up to Kassapa Buddha, and then it becomes Gautama Buddha, or Sakya Buddha, depends on what you call him, and who's our Buddha. So all the previous ones had taught exactly the same way, realized exactly the same way. Teaching had fizzled out, and then he rediscovered it. But with his enlightenment, he could know all about them and recall about them. And there were many Brahmas and Devas that also, their span encompassed ones where they could see about them as well and pass on knowledge for things like the creation of the monks' rules and things like that. Buddha could consult and say, what did the previous Buddha do under this circumstance, and so on. So this is still all prior to enlightenment. It's only up to chapter 4, and this goes up to 48 chapters or something. So I won't go into it. This is the chronological story of the Buddha in detail. So this is the Buddha's enlightenment, realization of the three knowledges. This is how he got past life knowledge, in how their lineage was paid by the Devas and the Brahmas when they realized he got a full enlightenment, that attainment of all the superpowers and so on and so on. 7 purifications of the Buddha as it happened. Magga Jnana Dasana, that's the realization of Nibbana, purification of knowledge, and many miracles and attainments. And then how he stayed at the 7 places under the tree, standing, just staring, walking backwards and forwards, and so on, and how he went to meet the 5 ascetics. And all the details about that, which is excellent to study. And many side details that you don't come across. Excellent reading, really rich book. I was misled that it wasn't that good. I met someone, a student who was meditating on a course that I was giving, who told me it was really interesting. And I went back to it and discovered that it's full of rich stuff. Even what I've got is, this is the actual Buddhavamsa. There's even an after chapter, which is about that thick, which was written by the same author, just details and details, and that's brilliant. And it's even just a kind of appendix, at the end. And that's brilliant. So, like all of these now, are the Buddha's life, one by one, by spring, by summer, by winter, by event, by event. Summer by winter, by event, by event, by event. This is Chintamana is a woman who pretends to be pregnant and says that the Buddha did it. And then what happens, and so on. So Buddhavamsa, really worth working through. If we can do a long-term course, this would be worth working through, class by class and some of it. You see the sort of sheer scale of it, that's the problem. It's very, very big. So negotiate, there's the usual problem about how to go into the teachings gradually and not overwhelmingly. So this is what I'm trying to do, is show you first of all a superstructural way of doing it, and then some of the more enterable parts of the Tipitika, and then just have a glimpse of the sheer scale, and but make it interesting and not off-putting enough as well. So that's my task. So these are details about arahants, 41 arahants, and things about them, how they got to be arahant, and their story, and the two chief disciples. So we'll talk richly about them. It's got quite amusing, again, sort of colorful stories, a lot of cross references, so you can see that it all holds together, which is always good. So it goes on in that vein, and it carries on about the male and female enlightened beings, and then lay, female and male people, like Sujata, the wife, Visakha, the key donor, all her details, more and more about her, which is also a very good, another way to approach the teaching, is just to read about the people. So there it goes. That's the introduction to the Buddhavamsa, 1,744 pages. We skimmed through 49 of them. So that's what you're up against. That kind of thing is nice, but excellent nonetheless. Something else is this, which is, so we're just talking about there about people. I've got an old version of the Digital Pali Reader, which I recommend you copy, because the new ones, they tend to use a lot of animation of Flash, and they put a lot of gadgets built into it. This old one is much quicker, because it doesn't know, now it's going to go slow. It's not just not as fancy, and it's a bit more basic. That's how it looks. And so it's a bit more basic, but it usually does it exactly when you want to. And in the N section, it's got a good dictionary of Pali names. So we want to find out about Visakha, who are just talking about there. You get all the people in all the places. Very, very handy. Visakha is probably one of these two. I don't know if it's Visakha or Visakha. It's the other one. That one. It's the chief among the lay disciples of the Buddha, declared by him to be foremost among those who administer to the order. She's considered the ideal laywoman. I told a story about her at the talk the other night, how a lot of women came along to see the Buddha, and they all hid away lots of little bottles of gin or vodka or something, breezers or whatever they had in those days. And they all got drunk, and they all started dancing on the tables, and Buddha emitted this powerful blue light across the whole place. They all went whoop, and then he started radiating white light up into the sky, and they went, oh no, we've done it now. And they sobered right up, and he taught them in such a way that they snapped out of it and attained. So this is a good way to find out about people and places, and it's also another way to cross-refer the reality of them, right. So when you read how intricately woven they are, where the places were and what happened at them, you see it's too good to be quite made up, They're too complex and too interwoven to have been an invention. So it makes it all that more interesting. That was a project I did at one point, which is just to read these one by one, to start with A and just read through, who they are and where they are, what they, and these are names of suttas and places. Name of anything that's a name, like monks, names of Jataka stories, names of Deva realms, a Deva realm, Abhasa, it's a luminous realm, and so on. It's just another way to sort of cut across. Actually, I found this very good because it cuts across everything. Like you might get one story like this about the Deva realms. Abhaya is a hell realm. Abhaya Sutta is about fearlessness, which means just looking at it. And Abhaya Giri is a place where the Buddha stayed, is a balm, a staying place, and so on. It just sort of cuts through them. You get a bit of the monk's rules, making a bit of the Buddha's life, a bit of a person, a bit of a king, a bit of a city, a bit of a woods, a bit of a summer. You get all these different things because it cuts across everything. Like a sampler dish. Exactly, nothing is too overwhelming and long. They're all sort of going as well, that sort of is just about this. They don't feel too obliged to have to repeat it all. All they're going to do is just wrap it up and tell you sort of what more or less happened in that sutta. A sort of woman possessed of the 5 powers, beauty, wealth, kings and son, continues to get the better of her husband. Finished. See, it's just a little wrap up. And that's a difficult thing, is to get those kind of things. It's good. I'll look at that. And then you can know where to find it. Samplers, exactly. So that's also another really good tool. And I did that for a while. It was just, and I've got the recordings of that. And I often do that. I'll use an MP3 player and just read them one by one. Like I just read, and the next one, and just read down, the next one, the next one, the next one. When you put enough of these temples for 3 months at a time, you so got a lot of time on your hands, and you meditate for sort of 2 weeks non-stop. But what about the next week and the next week and the next week? So some of those projects are really good to sort of like go through. This was an interesting project, probably a 556, which just really, just to interest, what I did here was to look at the Sallekha Sutta, very important sutta, and it talks about these things. The first 4 precepts, the first 4 vices: don't kill, don't steal, don't adulterate, and don't use bad speech. So don't kill, don't steal, don't adulterate, don't use bad speech, and then desire, anger, ignorance, and fear. Wasted, yes, indeed. And then the 6 ways of dissolution of wealth. Drink, drugs, hanging around in streets and shows, gambling. And for each of them, it gives 6, 6 things like that: shows, gambling, evil friends, and idleness. Next, drink. What is about drink? Lots of wealth, quarrels, disease, public exposure, weak intellect, hanging around the streets, leaves everything unguarded. You'd be suspected of all things, false rumors, meets troubles, gambling, shows. Yeah. So you're ever thinking, where's the drumming? Where's the singing? Where's the dancing? It's never ending. You're always chasing around. It's a never ending circuit of those things going on. So drumming gets more drumming, singing gets more singing. You've got to have the microphones. Where's the karaoke? Go on and on and on. One thing leads to another. Probably end up gambling. And so on. This is about the Sallekha Sutta, just an intro to it. It's another nice way to see it visually: adultery and drink, evil friends, fighters. So another bit of a launch into this huge subject. So I'd rather you did this to sort of get a sort of panoramic view that stays interesting, rather than start at book number 1 and just realize, this is like trying to go upstairs. Keep it interesting, find out where these useful, interesting bits are in a kind of cohesive whole. And that's what I'm trying to do. And then little by little, we can start to fill in the gaps as well as we go through. We can go a little bit deeper, little bit deeper, little bit deeper, really little bit of Mahasi side, or a little bit of Sallekha Sutta, a little bit of the synopsis, to find out a little bit more. And then gradually, roots deeper out like that. That's what I want to do. And then in the meantime, I've got all of these as free files. You can take them away and read them in your own time, up to your speed you want to go to. That's that. So there's no shortage of that. So that's your own choice about how much homework. A lot of homework. Well, that's how I take your time. That's why I try to make it interesting and find which homework to do as well, which is going to be refreshing. I like to jump around. Yeah, I think it's a really good way. And I think there are some things that are good to jump from, like Milinda Qs, jump, because you can flick it open at any page and, oh, nice one, question, answer. It's good. Quick one. 2 or 3 of those, 2 or 3 pages of that, fine. Read a bit of the Sutta, Sallekha Sutta. Read a bit of a Dhammapada and the stories, because it's, it's 500 each of those. So a little chunk is enough, a little chunk, not a chunk. But if you read a chunk of those, a chunk of Milinda, chunk of Dhammapada stories, chunk of Sallekha, a day, you'll get very rich, authority soon. Just build it up, Who's who, what's the actual teaching, as well as it staying entertaining enough, interesting. Applause. We should do something. I always forget that I'm not the most formal monks. We should do Namo Tassa 3 times at the beginning and at the end. Let's do that together then, as a homage to the Buddha, for a reverence for his transmission, and to honor and the gift and the heritage which is passed down, and the sincere wish, intention for this teaching to become established in the Philippines successfully for the benefit of the good people. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa. I'll say it. I don't know where it is immediately. Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa. Bhagavato. Arahato. Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa. Bhagavato. Arahato. Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa. Bhagavato. Arahato. Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Congratulate you, encourage you, say sadhu for your efforts. Thank you to Robin for all your intentions, your enthusiasm, hosting, facilities, encouraging others. Thank you both for all of your encouragement and also your enthusiasm. We need that. We need enthusiastic, keen people who can go the distance. Thank you, and share it. Did you see the analytics? I was going to show you this around the world where it's being seen. I think it's on here.